The galaxy had known humanity for 300 years, and in all that time, not a single species had ever feared them. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the Galactic Council chamber, surrounded by representatives from 1,000 different worlds. And she smiled the same patient smile she had worn for 40 years of service. It was the smile that every species in the Concord had come to expect from humans. The HFY ambassador, a towering reptilian creature with scales the color of dried blood, was speaking loudly about ancient territorial claims. And Elena listened without interrupting, just as she always did. This was what humanity did best. After all, they listened, they nodded, they compromised. And they walked away with less than they came, with the other species had many names for humans behind closed doors. The apologizers, the pushovers, the soft ones. Elena had hurt them all, and she had never once responded with anger. She had been trained from youth to represent humanity's greatest virtue. Patience, and patience, she had been taught, was the foundation of civilization. The council session ended with the HFY claiming another system that had been promised to human colonists. And Elena filed a formal complaint that she already knew would be ignored. She walked back to the human embassy through corridors filled with aliens who towered over her small frame. And she kept her head high and her expression calm. A young human aide fell into step beside her. "Ambassador, how can you accept this?" he asked. And his voice carried the frustration of youth. Elena glanced at him with kind eyes, because the alternative is worse. "Marcus, is it though?" he pressed, and Elena could see the anger burning in him. The same anger she had felt decades ago, before she learned to bury it deep. "We have lost 17 systems to the HFY in the last 50 years," he continued. "They destroy our ships and call it accidents. They kidnap our citizens and claim misunderstandings. They murdered 300 colonists on Kepler Station, and the council gave them a warning." "I know," Elena said quietly. "And why do we just take it?" Elena stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "Because we remember what we were before we learned peace, Marcus. And we made a promise to ourselves that we would never become that again." Marcus stared at her with confusion. But Elena did not explain further. Some truths were too heavy for the young to carry that night. Elena sat alone in her quarters and watched the stars through her window. She thought about the colony of New Helsinki. 400,000 humans living on a beautiful world at the edge of the Orion sector. She had visited there once. Years ago, she remembered children playing in fields of blue grass under an alien sun, laughing without any knowledge of the dangers that lurked in the dark between stars. Her communication device chimed, and she answered to find the face of Admiral Chun, a man she had known since childhood. His expression told her everything before he spoke a single word. "The HFY have blockaded New Helsinki," he said, and his voice was carefully controlled. 400,000 civilians, including 60,000 children. "They are demanding we surrender the entire Orion sector, or they will let the colony starve." Elena closed her eyes. "Has the council been informed?" "They have scheduled a discussion for next month." "Next month," Elena repeated. And something in her voice made Admiral Chun go very still. "Elena," he said carefully, "what are you going to do?" She opened her eyes, and for just a moment, the patient smile was gone. "I'm going to give them one more chance to do the right thing. Old friend, I am going to ask nicely one final time. And if they refuse," Elena was quiet for a long moment, "then I suppose we will have to remind the galaxy why humanity chose peace in the first place." Admiral Chun nodded slowly. "I will begin the preparations." "Not yet," Elena said. "We have spent 3 centuries building a reputation for patience. We will not throw that away without giving them every opportunity to avoid what comes next." The next day, Elena called an emergency session of the council species from across the galaxy, gathered in the great chamber. Curious about what had driven the normally passive humans to demand Immediate attention, the HFY Archon sat in his elevated seat, his massive form radiating contempt. Elena walked to the center of the chamber and looked around at the assembled representatives. She saw the Morith, insectoid beings who had cheated humanity in trade deals for a century. She saw the Volcari, who had accidentally destroyed 3 human exploration vessels. She saw a dozen other species who had taken advantage of human patience, who had grown fat on human compromise, who had learned to see human kindness as human weakness, and she saw the few allies humanity had made. Species who respected humans for their diplomacy, who genuinely believed in the peace humanity had tried to build. Those allies looked worried now. They had never seen Elena's face so still, so empty of its usual warmth. I have called this session to address the illegal blockade of the human colony New Helsinki by the HFY Dominion, Elena announced, and her voice carried clearly through the massive chamber. The Archon laughed, a harsh sound like stones grinding together. Illegal, he mocked. We are simply reclaiming what was always ours. The humans are trespassers in HFY space. That system was granted to humanity by this council 80 years ago. Elena replied calmly. Councils can be wrong, the Archon said. And several other species made sounds of amusement. Elena stood perfectly still. I am formally requesting that this council enforce its own laws and order the HFY to lift their blockade immediately. The chamber fell into the familiar pattern of debate. Representatives argued procedure and precedent. The HFY insisted on their historical claims. Hours passed, and Elena watched it all with eyes that grew colder with each passing minute. Finally, the council voted. The motion to intervene failed. The HFY blockade would stand. The Archon rose from his seat and pointed one clawed finger at Elena. You see, human, this is the way of the galaxy. The strong take and the weak accept. Your species has no fleet, no army. You have cargo ships and negotiators. You are prey, pretending to be predators. Go home and tell your people to surrender the Orion sector. It will be easier for everyone. Laughter filled the chamber. Elena stood alone at the center of it all, surrounded by the mockery of 1,000 worlds. And then she did something no human ambassador had ever done in 300 years of galactic diplomacy. She stopped smiling. The laughter died slowly as species after species noticed the change in her expression. It was such a small thing, just the absence of a smile, but somehow it filled the chamber with a tension that had not been there before. You have made your decision, Elena said, and her voice was quiet now, almost gentle. I understand. I want you all to remember this moment. Remember that we asked for justice and you gave us laughter. Remember that we begged for peace and you gave us contempt. She turned and walked toward the exit. The Archon called after her with mockery in his voice. What will you do? Human negotiated us. Elena paused at the door. No, she said without turning around. We are done negotiating. And then she was gone, leaving behind a chamber full of confused aliens who could not understand why those simple words had sent a chill down their spines. 3 days after the council rejected humanity's plea for help, Elena Vasquez requested permission to address the full Galactic Assembly. This was unusual. The full assembly only gathered for matters of galactic importance. Declarations of war, treaties between major powers, existential threats. A blockade of a minor human colony hardly seemed to qualify, but the council, curious about what the humans were planning, granted the request. Perhaps they wanted to see Elena beg again. Perhaps they simply wanted more entertainment at humanity's expense, whatever their reasons. Representatives from every known species packed the Great Assembly Hall. On the morning of the address, the HFY Archon sat in the front row, his massive form taking up 3 seats. His reptilian face twisted into a permanent sneer of contempt. Elena walked to the central platform alone. She wore simple clothes, Nothing ceremonial. Nothing impressive. She looked small and fragile, surrounded by so many larger, stronger, more powerful beings. She looked exactly like what the galaxy believed humans to be: weak, harmless prey. "Thank you for gathering," Elena began, and her voice was calm and measured. "I know many of you are wondering why I requested this assembly for what you consider a minor matter. I will explain." She touched a control on her wrist, and a holographic display appeared above her, filling the hall with light. "This is a record of every violation committed against humanity by the HFY Dominion since we joined the Galactic Concord." Numbers began scrolling across the display. 847 separate incidents over 200 years. 43 destroyed ships, 12,000 kidnapped citizens, 312 murdered colonists, 17 stolen systems. The numbers kept climbing. We filed formal complaints for every single incident. We followed every procedure. We respected every law. We trusted that the Concord would protect its members equally. Elena paused and looked around the hall. "We were naive." The Archon laughed loudly. "The human finally admits their weakness," he announced to the crowd. "Perhaps now they will learn their proper place in the galaxy." Elena turned to face him directly. "You misunderstand me, Archon. I am not admitting weakness. I am admitting that we trusted the wrong people." She deactivated the holographic display and stood in silence for a moment. "I came to this assembly to deliver a message. Not to beg for help we know will not come, but to give fair warning." Something in her tone made the hall grow quiet. "Humanity formally demands that the HFY Dominion lift their blockade of New Helsinki within one standard rotation. Every ship must be withdrawn. Every weapon must be powered down. Our people must be allowed to live in peace." The Archon rose from his seat, towering over the assembly. "Or what, little human? What will you do if we refuse?" Elena met his gaze without flinching. "Then humanity will resolve this matter ourselves." Laughter exploded across the hall. The Archon's mockery was loudest of all, a booming sound that echoed off the walls. "Resolve it yourselves," he repeated. "With what? Your cargo ships, your merchants, your diplomats armed with harsh words?" He stepped closer to Elena, using his size to intimidate. "Humanity has no military. You disbanded your war fleet 200 years ago. You have no weapons, no soldiers, no power of any kind. You are nothing but prey animals who have forgotten their place in the food chain." Elena did not step back. "You have mistaken our patience for inability," she said quietly. "You have confused our mercy for weakness. This is your one warning. Archon, lift the blockade. Release our people. And this ends peacefully. And if I do not, then you will learn why humanity chose peace 300 years ago. You will learn what we were before we made that choice. And I promise you, Archon, you will not enjoy the lesson." The hall was filled with sounds of amusement. Species whispering to each other about human delusion, about the sad spectacle of a weak species making threats it could never back up even. Humanity's allies looked embarrassed. One of them, a tall insectoid being from a species called the Thornax, approached Elena as she prepared to leave. "Ambassador, please, I understand your frustration, but these threats only make humanity look foolish. You have no way to back them up." Elena looked at her old friend with sad eyes. "I know you believe that. Counselor, I know everyone here believes that. I wish it were true." "What do you mean?" Elena glanced around the hall at all the species who had dismissed and mocked and exploited humanity for centuries. "We let you believe we were harmless because the alternative frightened us. We pretended to be weak because we were afraid of what we might do if we admitted our strength. For 300 years, we have been lying to the entire galaxy." The Thornax counselor stared at her with confusion. Lying about what? Elena did not answer. She simply turned and walked out of the assembly hall, leaving behind a galaxy that had no idea what was about to happen. far away. In the Sol system, humanity's home, things were beginning to change. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, facilities that had been sealed for 3 centuries received activation codes from Earthlights flickered on in. Tunnels that stretched for thousands of kilometers, machines that had been dormant since before humanity joined the Concorde hummed back to life in orbit around Jupiter. Massive structures that every visiting alien had been told were historical monuments began to move their ancient engines fired for the first time in generations, and they slowly repositioned themselves into formation on Earth itself. A message went out to every human across the galaxy. It was simple and direct. The time has come. You know what this means. You know what you must do. May God forgive us for what comes next. In homes and offices and ships scattered across 1,000 systems, humans read the message and understood. Some wept, some prayed, but none refused, because every human, from the moment they were old enough to understand, had been taught the truth about their species. They had been taught about the wars that nearly destroyed Earth. They had been taught about the weapons they had created, devices that could crack planets and boil oceans and end civilizations in hours. They had been taught about the choice their ancestors made when they first reached the stars. The promise to never again unleash the monster that lived inside humanity's soul, and they had been taught that someday that promise might have to be broken in hidden shipyards across human space. Cargo vessels began their transformation panels slid back to reveal weapons that had been maintained in secret for generations. Cargo bays emptied of goods and filled with soldiers who had trained their entire lives for a war they hoped would never come. What had looked like a scattered fleet of merchants and traders revealed itself as something else. Entirely a military force, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. On the bridge of a ship called the Remembrance, Admiral Chun stood before his crew. "You all know why we are here," he said. "You all know what we are about to do. I will not pretend this is easy. We have spent 3 centuries being peaceful. 3 centuries proving that humanity could be better than our worst instincts. And now we must become what we swore we would never be again." He paused and looked at the faces of his people. "The Kethvari have given us no choice. The galaxy has given us no choice. So we will do what must be done, and when it is over, we will return to our peace. But first, we will remind the universe why humanity should never, ever be pushed too far." The fleet began to move. Thousands of ships, hidden in plain sight for 300 years, converged on a single point. The Kethvari had no idea what was coming. No one did, but they would learn soon enough, and the lesson would echo through galactic history forever. To understand what humanity was about to unleash upon the galaxy, one must first understand what humanity had once been 350 years before the blockade of New Helsinki. A human exploration ship made first contact with an alien species called the Zelethi. Zelethi were predators in the truest sense of the word. They did not see other intelligent species as potential allies or trading partners. They saw them as food. When the human ship sent peaceful greetings, the Zelethi responded by capturing the vessel and eating its crew alive. They broadcast the feeding to Earth as a warning. "This is what happens to prey," the message said. "Surrender your worlds, and we will make your deaths quick." The Zelethi had conquered dozens of species this way. Their empire stretched across 300 systems, built on the bones of civilizations that had begged for mercy and received none. They expected humanity to be no different. They expected fear and submission and easy conquest. They were wrong. What followed became known as the First Contact War, and it lasted 11 terrible years. Humanity threw everything they had into the fight. They built weapons that the galaxy had never seen before. Ships that could tear through Zalathi fleets like knives through paper bombs, that could reduce planets to ash, soldiers who fought with a ferocity that shocked even the Zalathi predators by the end of the war. The Zalathi Empire was gone, not defeated, not conquered, gone, every ship destroyed, every world burned, every last member of the species hunted down and eliminated. Humanity had looked into the eyes of monsters and become monsters themselves. And when the war was over, when the last Zalathi body had been reduced to dust, humanity looked at what they had done and felt horror. They had won. But at what cost? They had become exactly what they had fought against: predators who showed no mercy, killers who could not be stopped. When humans finally made contact with the Galactic Concord a few decades later, they made a choice. They would hide what they were. They would pretend to be peaceful, harmless, weak. They would disband their war fleets and mothball their weapons and train their children to value diplomacy over violence, not because they were incapable of war, but because they were too capable of it. The leaders of that generation understood something terrible about humanity when pushed to the edge. Humans did not simply fight to win, they fought to destroy. Utterly and completely. Fought with a cold fury that other species could not comprehend. They fought until nothing remained of their enemies but dust and memory, and so they buried their weapons in hidden shipyards. They sealed their planet crackers in orbits around distant moons. They converted their warships into cargo vessels and their soldiers into merchants. They created a fiction of weakness and maintained it for 300 years. Every human child was taught the truth when they came of age. They were told about the Zalathi War. They were shown what humanity was capable of, and they were made to understand why the lie was necessary. Because if the galaxy ever learned what humans really were, there would be no peace. There would only be fear, and fear, the elders taught, leads to war. So humanity pretended, and the galaxy believed. And for 300 years, the lie held until now, in a hidden command center beneath the surface of Luna. The Human War Council met for the first time since its founding. These were the keepers of humanity's darkest secrets, admirals and generals who had spent their careers maintaining the fiction of peaceful cargo fleets, while secretly preparing for the day when the truth would have to be revealed. Admiral Chun stood before holographic map of the galaxy. The Kethvari have 47 capital ships blockading New Helsinki, he reported. Their main fleet numbers over 1,000 vessels. Their homeworld is defended by orbital platforms and planetary shields. How long to defeat them? Asked General Morrison, a woman whose family had served in the shadow military for 5 generations. If we commit the full fleet, approximately 1 week. The council fell silent. They had always known this day might come. They had trained for it, planned for it, prayed it would never arrive, and now it was here. Elena Vasquez entered the chamber, still wearing her diplomatic robes. The council has rejected our final warning, she announced. The Archon laughed at us. The galaxy laughed at us. They truly believe we are helpless. Then we show them the truth, said Admiral Chanelena. Nodded slowly, her face etched with grief. I have spent my entire life working for peace. I have accepted insults and humiliations without complaint, because I believed it was worth it to avoid what we are about to do. And now I must ask you to become the very thing we have spent 3 centuries pretending we are not. She looked at each member of the War Council in turn. I am sorry. I am so sorry that it came to this. Admiral Chun stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. This is not your failure, Elena. It is theirs. They were given every chance to choose peace. They chose contempt. Now they will live with the consequences. The command went out across human space in orbit around Saturn. The mothball battle platforms came fully online. Their weapons charging for the first time in generations in asteroid belts and hidden bases. Soldiers who had trained in secret donned armor that had been kept, ready for exactly this moment, and in the hearts of humans everywhere. Something old and terrible began to wake. The lie was ending, the mask was coming off, and the galaxy was about to meet the real humanity on Earth. A grandmother held her grandson and told him stories about the HFY War. Stories she had learned from her own grandmother. Why did we hide? The boy asked. If we were so strong, why did we pretend to be weak? Because strength without wisdom is just destruction, she answered. We learned that lesson in Fire and Blood. We became something terrible to survive. And then we chose to become something better. Are we going to be terrible again? The grandmother was quiet for a long moment. Yes, child, but only for a little while, only until the galaxy remembers to treat us with respect. And then we will put the monster back to sleep. What if it does not want to go back to sleep? It was a child's question. Simple and innocent, but it cut to the heart of humanity's greatest fear. What if, once awakened, the monster could not be controlled? What if the peace they had built was just a temporary prison? What if they were always meant to be predators across the galaxy? The human fleet gathered, 10,000 warships, each one capable of destruction beyond anything the HFY could imagine. They moved in perfect formation, silent and deadly. Toward the edge of HFY space, a single scout ship jumped ahead to deliver the final message. Appeared at the boundary of the blockade around New Helsinki, surrounded by HFY warships that immediately locked weapons on its tiny hull. The HFY commander opened the communication channel, expecting to hear pleas for mercy. Instead, a human face appeared on the screen. Calm and expressionless. This is Captain Sarah Cole of the Human Defense Force, she announced. I am here to deliver a message to the HFY Dominion. The HFY commander laughed. The Human Defense Force. I was not aware such a thing existed. It has always existed, Captain Cole replied. We simply chose not to use it. That choice has now ended. You have 1 hour to withdraw from New Helsinki and release our people. If you fail to comply, we will come for you. One ship threatens the entire HFY Dominion, the commander mocked. Human arrogance knows no bounds. Captain Cole smiled. But there was no warmth in it. Not one ship, she said. We asked nicely. You should have listened. She cut the communication, and behind her, space itself seemed to tear open as 10,000 human warships dropped out of faster than light. Travel in perfect formation. The HFY commander stared at the sensor readings with disbelief. This was impossible. Humanity had no fleet. Everyone knew that. And yet the evidence was undeniable. The largest military force in galactic history had just appeared in HFY space, and every single ship was marked with the flag of Earth. The Battle of New Helsinki lasted exactly 4 hours and 23 minutes. In that time, the entire HFY blockade fleet was destroyed, not defeated, not driven back, not forced to surrender. Destroyed 47 capital ships reduced to floating debris. 300 support vessels torn apart by weapons that the galaxy had never seen. The HFY had always believed themselves to be among the greatest warriors in known space. They had conquered dozens of systems. Through military might, they had never lost a major engagement in their entire recorded history. That history ended above New Helsinki. The human fleet moved with terrifying precision. Every ship knew exactly where to be and exactly when to fire. There was no confusion, no hesitation, no wasted effort. It was not a battle. It was an execution. The HFY commander sent a desperate message to his homeworld in the final moments before his flagship was destroyed. They were never weak. He screamed into the communication device. It was all a lie. Warn the Archon, warn everyone. The humans are coming, and nothing can stop them. The message was received on the HFY homeworld minutes later. The Archon read it with trembling claws, and for the first time in his long life, he felt fear on New Helsinki. 400,000 human colonists watched the sky light up with explosions. They had spent weeks under blockade, rationing food, wondering if help would ever come, trying to keep their children calm while enemy ships circled overhead. Now those same children pressed their faces against windows and watched the HFY fleet burn. A young girl asked her, "Father, what was happening?" "Our people came for us," he answered, and there were tears streaming down his face. "They finally came for us." The colonists did not know about the hidden fleet. They believed, like everyone else, that humanity had no military. They had thought they would die forgotten on this distant world, abandoned by a species too weak to protect its own. Now they understood. The truth: humanity had never been weak. Humanity had simply been waiting. Admiral Chun broadcast a message to the colony as the last HFY ship was destroyed. "People of New Helsinki, the blockade is broken. You are safe now. Supply ships are on their way with food and medicine. We are sorry we could not come sooner. We are sorry you had to suffer. But know this: humanity never forgot you. Humanity will never abandon its people again." Cheers erupted across the colony. People embraced in the streets. Strangers wept together. But in the command center of the human fleet, there was no celebration. Admiral Chun looked at the debris field that had once been a powerful enemy force, and he felt only sadness. "It has begun," he said quietly to Elena, who stood beside him. "There is no going back now." "I know," she replied. "What happens next? We finish what they started." The human fleet did not stop at New Helsinki. It pushed deeper into HFY space. System by system, world by world, the HFY scrambled to respond. They gathered their main fleet, over 1,000 warships, the largest military force they had ever assembled. They positioned themselves in front of their homeworld, ready to defend their civilization against the impossible enemy that had emerged from nowhere. The Battle of HFY Prime lasted 2 days. It was not because the humans struggled. It was because Admiral Chun wanted the galaxy to see. He wanted every species watching to understand exactly what humanity was capable of. The HFY fleet was dismantled piece by piece. Human tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. They seemed to know every weakness in HFY formation, every flaw in their ships, every blind spot in their defenses. 300 years of pretending to be harmless had given humanity time to study everyone. They had analyzed every species, learned every military doctrine, identified every vulnerability, all while smiling and nodding and accepting insults. Now that knowledge was being used to devastating effect. By the end of the second day, the HFY fleet was gone. Their orbital defenses were destroyed. Their planetary shields were down. Their homeworld lay exposed and helpless beneath the shadow of 10,000 human warships. The Archon sent a message of surrender. He begged for mercy. He promised to withdraw from all human systems. He offered reparations, treaties, anything the humans wanted. Admiral Chun did not respond to him. Instead, he responded to Elena. "What do you want to do?" he asked. Elena looked at the display showing the HFY homeworld. Billions of lives at the mercy of her next words. "They killed our people," she said slowly. "They laughed at our dead. They threatened to starve 400,000 innocent civilians, including 60,000 children." She was quiet for a long moment. "Part of me wants to burn their world to ash. And the other part? The other part remembers why we chose peace in the first place." She turned to face the Admiral directly. "We are not them. We cannot become them if we destroy their world. We prove that we are the monsters they should have feared. If we show mercy, we prove that we are better than our worst instincts. They showed us no mercy, Admiral Chun pointed out. No, they did not, and that is exactly why we must be different. We did not build a civilization of peace just to abandon it the moment we were tested. Admiral Chun nodded slowly. Then what do? We make them remember. But we do not make them extinct. The human fleet did not bomb the HFY homeworld. Instead, they descended on every military target in the system. Shipyards were destroyed, weapons factories were reduced to rubble, training facilities were dismantled. Every single piece of military infrastructure that the HFY had built over millennia was systematically eliminated in 6 days. A galactic power was reduced to a pre-spaceflight civilization. They still had their world. They still had their people, but they would never threaten anyone. Again, the Archon was captured and brought before Elena. On the bridge of the Remembrance, he looked different. Now the arrogance was gone. The contempt was gone. He looked old and broken and terrified. Elena stood before him in silence for a long time. I remember you laughing at me, she finally said. I remember you calling us prey. I remember you asking what we would do. Negotiate at you. The Archon said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the floor. We gave you every chance, Elena continued. We warned you. We begged you. We followed every rule and every procedure. And you responded with mockery. You were so certain that we were weak. She stepped closer, forcing him to meet her eyes. We were never weak. Archon, we were afraid. Afraid of what we knew we could do. Afraid of what we might become if we stopped pretending. You should have been afraid too. What will you do to me? The Archon whispered. Elena considered the question. Nothing, she finally said. You will live. You will return to your people. And you will spend the rest of your days knowing that your arrogance destroyed everything your species had built. That is punishment enough. She turned away from him. Take him back to his world. Let him watch what remains of his empire. Let him remember what his contempt cost. The Archon was escorted away. Admiral Chun approached Elena after he was gone. You showed him mercy he did not deserve. Perhaps, Elena replied. Or perhaps I showed the galaxy something more important. What is that? That humanity's strength is not in our weapons. Our greatest strength is in our ability to be better than those who hurt us. Even when every part of us screams for revenge. She looked out at the stars. We had to remind the galaxy what we are capable of. Now we must remind ourselves what we choose to be. The galaxy was never the same after the fall of the HFY. Dominion, every species had witnessed what happened. They had watched the impossible unfold in real time. The humans. The weak and harmless humans. The species they had mocked and exploited and dismissed for 3 centuries. Had destroyed one of the most powerful military forces in known space. In less than a week, and they had done it. Without even appearing to struggle, fear spread through the Concord like a plague. Species that had cheated humanity in trade deals suddenly wanted to renegotiate. Governments that had ignored human complaints suddenly wanted to review old grievances. Ambassadors who had laughed at Elena Vasquez suddenly could not meet her eyes. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Every species sent their most senior representatives. The chamber was silent. When Elena walked to the central platform, no one laughed. Now, I understand your fear, Elena began. You have spent 3 centuries believing a lie. And now you are wondering what else we have hidden. You are wondering if we will come for you next. She paused and looked around the hall. I am here to answer that question. She activated a holographic display showing the entire galaxy. Humanity did not build this fleet to conquer. We built it to survive. We have no interest in ruling over other species. We have no desire to become an empire. All we have ever wanted is to live in peace. The Thornax counselor Elena's old friend spoke up from the crowd. Then why did you hide your power? Why did you pretend to be weak for so long? Elena's expression grew sad, because we were afraid of ourselves. When humanity first reached the stars, we encountered a species that saw us as food. They were called the Zelafi, and they taught us something terrible about our own nature. She told them the story. She told them about the first contact. War. She told them about the 11 years of bloodshed. She told them how humanity had destroyed an entire species so completely that nothing remained but ruins and memories. We looked at what we had done, Elena said, and we were horrified. We had become the very thing we were fighting. Predators who showed no mercy. Killers who could not be stopped. And we swore that we would never become that again. So you pretended to be harmless. The counselor said, yes, we thought that if we hid our strength, if we avoided conflict, if we made ourselves seem weak, we could escape our own nature. We could be the peaceful species we wanted to be. Elena shook her head slowly. We were wrong. What do you mean? Peace is not the absence of strength. Peace is the choice to use strength wisely. We tried to achieve peace by pretending we had no power, but that only invited exploitation. It only taught the galaxy that we could be abused without consequence. She deactivated the holographic display. So here is the new arrangement. Her voice hardened. The Galactic Concord will continue to exist, but its laws will now be enforced. Equally for everyone, humanity will ensure this. Not because we want power, but because clearly no one else will do what must be done. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. You want to rule us? Someone called out. No, Elena replied firmly. We want justice. There is a difference. We will not interfere in your internal affairs. We will not demand tribute or submission. We will not conquer or colonize. But we will ensure that no species is ever again treated the way humanity was treated. We will ensure that the strong cannot prey on the weak without consequence. She looked directly at the species who had exploited humanity over the centuries. You called us the apologizers. You called us the pushovers. You thought our patience was weakness. Now you know the truth. Our patience was a gift. A chance for you to choose a better path. You wasted it. She turned to address the full assembly one final time. I want you all to remember something. We did not want this. We spent 300 years trying to be better than our nature, trying to prove that peace was possible, and you forced us to become what we swore we would never be again. Her voice dropped low. You called us prey. You called us weak. You were half right. We chose to be gentle, but make no mistake. We are predators who learn to love peace. Do not make us forget that lesson again. Elena walked out of the chamber now. One spoke for a long time after she was gone in the years that followed. The galaxy changed human peacekeeping ships patrolled the borders between hostile powers, human mediators resolved disputes that had festered for centuries. Human observers ensured that trade deals were fair and treaties were honored. The mockery stopped, the exploitation stopped. The galaxy learned to treat humanity with respect, but it was respect born from fear. And everyone knew a decade after the reckoning. A young alien student asked their teacher about humanity's history. The teacher, a member of a species that had once laughed at human ambassadors, considered the question carefully. There is an old saying now, the teacher finally said, one that every species teaches their children. It goes like this. Pray you never see a human lose their patience. Pray harder that you are not the reason why. Are humans really that dangerous? The student asked. They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The teacher answered. Not because they love war, but because they hate it. Not because they want to fight, but because when they do fight, they fight to end all fighting, forever. I do not understand. Most species fight to win. Humans fight to make sure they never have to fight again. That is what makes them terrifying. They do not stop until the threat is completely and utterly eliminated. They will accept any cost, endure any sacrifice, commit any act to ensure that the war ends permanently. The teacher paused, and then, when it is over, they go back to being gentle and kind. As if nothing happened, they build and create and help. And they never speak of what they did unless forced to. That is the mystery of humanity. They contain both extremes. And you never know which one you will face until it is too late. On Earth, far from alien politics and galactic tensions, an elderly Elena Vasquez sat in a garden filled with flowers from a dozen worlds, a young human child. Her great-granddaughter played nearby. The child stopped and looked up at her ancestor, grandmother. What was the galaxy like before? Elena smiled, though there was sadness in her eyes. Louder, she said. Everyone was so loud, so certain they were powerful, so sure that strength meant cruelty. And now they are quieter. They learned something important. What did they learn? Elena reached out and touched the child's face gently. They learned that the most dangerous thing in the universe is not the species that fights. It is the species that chooses not to fight, until it has no choice left. The child considered this with the seriousness that only children can manage. Is that why we try to be kind? Because we know we can be scary. Elena felt tears forming in her eyes. Yes, little one, that is exactly why. We know what lives inside us. We know what we can become if we let go of our humanity. So we hold on to kindness as tight as we can. We choose love over hate, peace over war, mercy over revenge. But sometimes we have to let go. Sometimes, Elena admitted, sometimes evil leaves us no choice. And when that happens, we become something terrible, but only for as long as we must. And then we put the monster back to sleep. She pulled the child into a hug. Never forget who we choose to be, she whispered. Never forget that our greatest strength is not in our weapons or our ships. Our greatest strength is in our ability to be kind when cruelty would be easier, to show mercy when revenge would feel better, to build when destruction would be simpler. I will remember. Grandmother. Good, Elena said. That is the most important lesson humanity has ever learned. And it is the one we must never, ever forget. Above them, the stars shone bright and peaceful somewhere out in the darkness. Human ships patrolled the borders of known space, keeping watch over a galaxy that had finally learned to live in peace, not because they were forced to, but because they had seen what happened when they did not, and no species would ever forget the day humanity's patience finally ran out.